Thanks for tuning in to the Lean 911 podcast, where you'll have a voice directly from the Gemba. I will rely on my 3 decades of Lean successes as well as my failures to answer your most challenging questions regarding your Lean transformation. I'm your host, Mark DeLuzio, President and CEO of Lean Horizons Consulting and the Principal Architect of the Danaher Business System. Looking forward to your questions. Now, let's go to the Gemba. Okay, I guess we're live, Mark. Mark Forkin from Poland. I'm supposed to be there today. Mark DeLuzio from North Carolina in the United States. And sorry I couldn't make it there this week. I was scheduled to come last week and had some health issues. And just the doctor said, you better not go. And so I didn't go. My wife is all upset because her father's from Poland in the general area of Krakow. And she wanted me to pick up all kinds of goodies over there while I was there, but I'll have to do that another time. But Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, and I'm so happy we at least we can meet, online and have a chat and do this recording. But it was health matters come first, so. I understand that you couldn't make it over, so maybe it was meant to be that way, and there'll be another occasion. So just make use of what we can. So thank you very much for inviting me to the show.
No problem. We had some people sign in already. I have my friend Ricardo from Mexico, and right. Mario just signed in from Spain. So we got a couple people already signing in. And I know it's a Monday morning over here in the U.S. and afternoon over in Europe, and who the heck knows what time it is in Asia. But what we wanted to do, I think, Mark, is talk a little bit about Lean transformations and some of the questions that we've always been asked about Lean. And maybe we could start by just looking at some of the questions that I've already recorded that came in over the last couple of weeks. And also, by the way, questions that you and I have been asked for the longest time, in terms of, I guess the key here is that there's no real silver bullets, right? There's no, keys to the kingdom. Everything is variable. Every issue that you walk into, every company, Lean has to be customized, And I talk about the Danaher Business System, and I made the statement not too long ago that we didn't really invent all that much. It's how we used it. It's kind of like a great author using the words in the dictionary. They didn't invent any of the words, but how they assembled those words, they created a masterpiece, like Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, Hemingway, all the great authors of the world, assembled those words together into something that really worked, right? And that's kind of how I look at the Danaher Business System. And most of what the value of DBS is, you can't see. It's the invisible. And that's something I learned a long time ago on my very first trip to Toyota in Japan, of many trips. They told me, the reason they let their competition see their factories is because what they really need to know they cannot see, right? And so, and I know you worked with Toyota, for Toyota, and maybe you could say a couple of words about that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement that you can. I'll take it a step further and say that when I walk into a company and let's say this is a company that's been doing Lean for a number of years, you can see a lot of visual management. You can see Kanban boards, 5S, some KPIs here and there, a TPM system, and so on. But what I'm really looking forward to seeing is what you don't see, is what's the mindset of the people? What's the culture? What is the culture of this organization? If they have andon signals and even information about how the andon should be used, is it really being used? What is, how has, for example, andon been introduced? Is it a tool just to stop a process? Or is it a fundamental principle for saying that can be used by any employee in any situation where they feel that they are running away with the quality that they need to understand during a training session or a workshop session or a coaching session, or during the process. Yeah, is the inbuilt process that is expected of them, or which they expect from somebody else, being running away out of their control, and that will therefore affect the cycle time or the delivery date of what they want to understand or what they want to deliver on their process. So what I'm trying to see is understand, do these systems work? And that's not very visible. Yeah. And I remember the same thing at Toyota. We would show people around, and they would be desperately trying to take photographs. We would say, well, you can't take photographs, you know, that's not, but we'll give you time to think about some of the things you've seen. But what you will not see is what we've done to the minds of these people. Yeah, what we've done to the minds of these people, what really has happened here between the two ears. Because that's what we see on the factory floor is just the outcome of a whole series of training and development that's taken place in the change in the mindset of how these people think and how they behave, their habits. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you. You know, it's
My simple example is anybody could put up an andon light, but what happens when that light goes on? That's what really matters, right? What happens? What are the behaviors? What's the sense of urgency? What's the thinking behind it? Is there work standards that dictate what has to happen by when and who's going to do what when that light goes on? Right now, a lot of people, you know, throw up andon lights, and I'm just using that as an example. But there's no thinking beyond putting up the light, and so the lights go on, nothing happens. They fill out work orders for machine downtime. 4 days later, the machine maybe gets fixed. And notice I didn't say solved, I said fixed. It's a big difference between problem solving and problem fixing, right? But you know, I think that's the real key to this thing is what happens behind the scenes. You know, what's the thinking? What's the culture? What's the behavior? I have a question from Colleen, a good friend and colleague of mine, and she wants to talk about value stream management, not mapping. She wants to talk about value stream management. And Colleen and I have been talking quite a bit about how we are trying to do value stream management, but so many companies refuse to divorce themselves of functional structures. So you still have the functions like engineering, manufacturing, finance, HR, and everybody wants to work within a value stream. Now you've got the people stuck in that matrix organization that basically is beholden to two bosses, the value stream leader and their functional boss. Well, usually the functional boss always wins out, and the value stream leader has to now lobby for resources throughout this functional matrix, which delays everything. That value stream leader does not have control of their own destiny. And I'll give you a really good example. I had a client, and some people may have heard me talk about this before, where they tried to set up a value stream organization, but the functions didn't change, okay? And the sales organization was compensated based on shipments. So at the end of the quarter, they all try to make their sales bonus, and this particular plant that we were working with they received 30% of their orders in the last 2 days of the month. Okay. And how did that happen? The sales function went to their customer base, discounted the heck out of the product, and incentivized them to take product early. All right. Now, right there, you're breaking the just-in-time principle right off the bat. Okay. Not only did they discount it, now the plant had to incur all kinds of extra costs to try to get this product out. So the salespeople won. That function won. They made their sales objectives. They got their compensation. There was something called a President's Club where everybody got their bonuses, and some guys got cruises out of the deal and all kinds of vacation packages. But the organization lost. So here the value stream's trying to do hijuncle level scheduling, trying to adhere to all the fundamental principles of lean, but the sales function, which was not integrated into the value stream, um, created all kinds of behaviors that were just anti-lean. Okay, so you had this big conflict, and that's what ends up happening in an organization. The problem, though, is that these leaders of these functions, usually at the vice president or director level, are the people that have to decide to go to value streams. So now you're the vice president of manufacturing, and you're saying, "Well, I got to relinquish this title, or engineering, or whatever. I've got to relinquish this title now to go to a customer-facing value stream, where the value stream leader is kind of like a little mini general manager, if you think about it." And there's all kinds of ways to set up value streams, so maybe not get into that right now. But you want that person to have control of their destiny, not have to go lobby for engineering support or quality support or finance support. You want that person to be able to have control of their destiny. And most value stream leaders that I see only have control over the manufacturing side of the business to a degree. Not always, because sometimes planning is outside of their jurisdiction. Sometimes quality and even engineering is outside of their jurisdiction. So, so it's a real mess, and there's not too many true value streams that I've seen in my going on 4 decades now of doing this. Really true value streams, right? What's your experience? I mean, have you seen really true value streams?
No, never seen it. Never seen such a situation. I've seen fragments of it within, like production, for example, but then they don't have full autonomy, as you said, because they don't value stream, for example, the support functions that they need. Somebody else dictates the situation for them. So I've never really seen a business where with a full value stream, whether it be customer based, product based, or process based. I've never really come across that. I've seen fragments of it, maybe in service industry, it would be more relevant. For example, in finance or banking or leasing companies. They look at it from end to end, and there'll be someone that will be responsible for that. But in a manufacturing environment, it's very much classical, silo management, when then conflicting KPIs at the top.
Well, conflicting KPIs. So there you go. That leads into another question. Actually, Colleen asked this question as well. How does lean accounting support decision making differently than traditional cost accounting?
Excellent question.
And I know you and I have accounting backgrounds.
Yes.
I know we're afraid to admit that, right? But how have you seen lean accounting, Mark, drive the right behaviors as opposed to traditional, cost accounting, if you will?
Very rarely does do the up until now, very few finance people, whether it's the financial controller or it's the chief accountant or it's the finance director, very few people have actually come on board and said, well, how can we learn to not only optimize our internal processes, so that's lean accounting, and also, can you teach us something about accounting for lean? Yeah, in terms of the way we report the business. And when somebody comes to you and says that, it puts a smile on your face, because you think, well, if the finance director is asking you to not only help optimize their processes, because they realize they're a production process as well. They have paper, they have documents to process, and they have deadlines, and they have internal clients and external clients. But if you actually take it a step further, and they say, we actually want to see, are we reporting in a way which gives us full transparency of the business from the P&L and the balance sheet and the cash flow, then you think, I'm going to sit down and really help these people, because they are extremely serious about this. And that is happening more often now than it used to. That where the finance people are coming in and say, we want to be part of this transformation journey. And I guess it's because there is so much pressure now in the Western particularly in the companies that we look at, the Western Western Hemisphere, that under cost pressure, that now the finance people are coming in and saying, are we really reporting? Is our management reporting system adequate for the in the context of the competitive business environment that we're in today? And that is really good news, because then you can actually take it a step further and say, well, let's talk about Kaizen. And you say, well, what is Kaizen? And everybody says, well, Kaizen is continuous improvement. It's improvement of process. It's creating ideas. It's problem solving. And they give you all these lovely reasons. And I said, yeah, but let's assume that I'm a very sort of limited in terms of my ability to focus on what people are telling me. And I really just want to hear really what Kaizen is about. And from a business perspective, Kaizen is nothing more than working to reduce the cost of one unit.
Right.
At the end of the
Hey, Mark, can I ask you? You come through okay, but can you step a little closer to the mic?
Yeah.
You were a little bit sometimes fading in. Yeah, that's a lot better. Yeah,
so,
that'd be great.
Yeah. So and so if say, well, if you're now looking at the operational side of the business and saying, look, people are doing these problem solving, A3, D4, D8, PDCA, 1 point lesson. They're doing all these problem solvings to improve availability, improve quality, reduce cost. So now the finance department, or the analysis and finance department, or the analysis and financial reporting department, can really get involved and say and show which Kaizens are affecting which position in the P&L account. And that then allows you to have a very good conversation to say, well, what does your financial reporting system look like? Do you have, for example, what I call M1, the first margin, which is where you take your sales minus your direct cost of the product, direct cost of labor, direct cost of material, and anything that you want to consider as a direct cost. And out of that, you have your first margin. You say, well, if you take away my direct variable costs, I have a profit margin, which hopefully is quite high. And that profit margin, let's call it M1, margin number one, has to cover the indirect costs of creating that product and the fixed costs, right? And so therefore you could then create the second margin and the third margin and the fourth margin. And that really then becomes a value, for me, a value stream discussion, because finance is saying, what can we do to provide the right information to the value streams, which allows them to see what they have achieved from a financial perspective, from reducing the cost.
That's a great point, because if you think about a lot of the data that gets calculated and published out of finance groups, rarely do they ask, who's my customer, number one, and two, what do they need to run their business? In a lot of respects, a lot of the data that gets generated out of accounting is a push system. They're pushing info on you that you may not necessarily need, and may not be giving you the information that you do need, right? And so I always looked at accounting as a batch process. There's 12 batches a year, because we close our books 12 times a year. And I also looked at it as not being timely, not being relevant, because you're always looking at history. You're not being, you're not spending time being a navigator. You're spending more of your time being a historian. And if you look at what you said about accounting for lean versus lean accounting, okay, lean accounting means, how do I improve the accounting process to provide the data that's necessary in a timely manner, that's meaningful and that's timely, and I don't have to wait 2 weeks to find out what went wrong 2 weeks ago. I can't even remember what I had for lunch last week, never mind what the data was. So I look at that as a big batch process, and many times the finance people do not get on board, and they're sitting in the stands while everybody's in the arena fighting the lions. Little do they know that they have to be in the arena with the lions in order for lean to succeed. and many times they're standing in the stands with their clipboard saying, show me. Well, I turn it around on them and say, show me the value. Please cost justify your finance department. Show me what that financial analyst did and give me a return on investment on your financial analysis analyst. And they can't. Okay. So when they start asking you all these questions to cost justify every damn thing you do, it's a ridiculous question. And finance is a major reason why lean stops. Mario from Spain asked the question, what are some of the, what's some of the challenges? And this is a big one, Mario. It's a big challenge when the finance person is not on board. They're still looking at traditional accounting measures like absorption accounting, which drive batch build and discourages frequent changeovers. You want to do more changeovers, not less. You want to match your production plan as close as possible with your order pattern of your customer. You want to be able to not buy in volume to get a lower price. Purchase price variance promotes the wrong behavior. And the best way to get a lower price is to buy in bulk. Well, guess what? Principles that violates, right? And so one of the biggest problems I've seen is the infatuation with return on investment and the infatuation with productivity, where many times productivity is a single digit percentage of your cost, but there's so much time and effort that goes into calculating productivity. And to me, productivity is a lagging indicator. If your processes are right, you're going to get your productivity, you're going to get your cost. But if your process, nobody shows up to work wanting to do a bad job, right? Oh, yeah, there's exceptions. I got all that. But, but at the end of the day, people are frustrated when things don't go right. It's a bad day when processes don't work. And if leadership doesn't give, and so one of the other answers to Mario is everybody wants the results of great lean implementation, but the framework is not established to do so. And what do I mean by that? I mean the lean office, facilitators and teachers who are experienced, whether you use outside consultants and teach you how to fish, but you got to, internalize that capability. I was just with a client in South Africa over the last couple of weeks, and they're phenomenal. They are setting up, they recognized that they didn't have a framework in their organization to work on the business. They expected everybody who was working in the business to also do Kaizen and do all this other stuff. And that's not to say they're not going to be involved in Kaizen, but they had no infrastructure to improve the business. And the leaders there recognized that. And we actually worked with them before we left to set up an organization on the corporate level and at the plant level in terms of how they're going to attack the major issues that are facing them from an operating perspective. At this point right now, you can get to a point where these operating issues like long changeovers, poor delivery, bad quality actually inhibits your growth. Because as Deming said, the biggest cost of poor quality is when customers decide they don't want to do business with you anymore and they go somewhere else. That's the biggest cost. And that's another thing I'd like to see finance get more involved in. Instead of spending all their time tracking productivity to some standard cost efficiency variance that means nothing, I'd love to see them calculate a cost of poor quality. And on a priority basis, there's some over 90 categories on cost of poor quality. And I'd like to see them calculate and understand what the true costs of poor quality, and a lot of those costs are hidden. And we got to be able to resurrect those costs. When your line stops, I don't know, 3 times an hour for only a minute, it may not sound like a lot, but that's 3 minutes out of 60. And do the math on that and what that means for capital. You'll find out pretty soon you got to build a new building, you got to buy new capital, you have to work another shift. I mean, the whole thing just snowballs. Okay. So these are the things that we're really talking about. And I think this also goes back to Mario's question mark about the misunderstandings and misconceptions of lean. Now you work for Toyota, and the question that Mario is asking is in our experience, what are the principal misunderstandings or misconceptions of lean as it was originated in Toyota? What's your thoughts on that? And by the way, he's talking not only respect for people, he's also talking about people development as well. Okay.
I think I need a little bit more than a few minutes to answer the question. I don't really know what lean is. I don't really understand lean. So I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask. But I have a pretty good idea about what TPS is, Total Production System, and the systems that make it work. But I would like to clarify that and say that I'm still very much a student of that philosophy. Yeah. And I think lean has been, so TPS lean has been sold as a set of tools and processes that if you implement, then you're going to arrive at the promised land. You know, you're going to arrive at some amazing future destination, which is going to put your competitors in a difficult situation. And that just doesn't happen. For me, the success really is in building the right mindset, the right habits, starting with yourself, about what you can do to support the people that work in the organization that are closest to the value stream. In other words, the operators, the team leaders, the group leaders, the supervisors. What you can do to provide them with the tools and the development to be able to solve problems, to maintain standards, to improve standards of work, and to engage people. You know, and I think where lean has failed is that so many people have grabbed onto the tools. I'll have a bit of 5S, I'll have some visual management, I'll have some KPIs, I'll have some SPQDC, I'll have a Kanban and a Heijunka, and I say, yeah, but you know, they're just tools. These people have to be able to understand why they use them, how can they improve them, how can they work together, how can they deal with everyday situations between, you know, inappropriate behavior between the individuals, between problems with processes. I think that the actual tools that you find within TPS, within lean, as we call it, as one calls it, is just one toolbox. But you need the other one. You need to have the other. You need to have the other tools, which is the ability to be able to manage people, starting with being able to manage yourself. And I think that's. I mean, from my experience, and I've worked with many companies. If we want to have sustainable, competitive business results, then we need to use the two-wheel concept, yeah, which is if you want business results, if you want the business wheel to turn, and that's been permanently joined by an axle, and the other wheel is called people development, then people developing through problem solving will drive your business results, and the two go together. They both turn together.
Yep.
So,
hey, by the way, Mark, you forgot to mention Gemba boards. You got to throw those in there too, right?
Yeah, Gemba boards and
I could talk all day about Gemba boards, okay?
Yeah.
But hey, by the way, there's a couple questions on here that came through. Alex talked about the framework. He agrees it's important to set up the framework, but you have to have outside staff to run the business, to actually indoctrinate lean into an organization. Or do you have people working internally? Obviously, you want to be able to take anything you learn on the outside, whether it's from a consultant like Mark or me or anything else, and internalize it. Our job is to build capabilities within your company so that you can fish for yourself. Remember the old biblical adage, give a man a fish, you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man a fish, you'll feed him for a lifetime. And a good consultant will focus on that latter part of that statement. And then another part of this question talks about Well, they're not 100% greenfield consultants. Let's say just coming out of Toyota. Let's say as an example, um, what assumptions do they making when they walk into brownfield environments, and what are the pitfalls? And I'll tie it into another question here that came through. Um, let's see, where is it? It had to do with, yeah, that was Alex's. And the other part of this has to do with people development and the like. So one of the things I am very fortunate for in my career, my first introduction to real lean from the guys that invented it at Toyota who worked directly for Taishi Ono. It's a Shingijutsu group. Only one now is still kicking around. That's my mentor, Nikao. But I am so fortunate I didn't have other consultants to screw me up. Now you get into this now, you go on LinkedIn, I don't care what topic you put out there. There are 5,000 different comments and views on how that's supposed to be done. And what we're missing is a divorce from the original fundamental concepts. So one of the questions here was, hey, how do you get started, right? And I always say start with the principles first, because if you start with the tools, it's like starting a house. Hey, I'm going to give you, Mark, a hammer, a saw, and some other tools. Go build me a house. Well, you don't have a plan. You don't have an architecture, which is your strategy. You don't have the concept of how to build a house and the principles of what goes into building a good house. And so you go out and start whacking in a bunch of tools, and you might build something that may resemble a house, but once it rains, the roof is going to leak. Okay. And sooner or later, the foundation is going to start settling. And you just now had all the appearances of doing lean with Gemba boards and posters and yellow lines on the floor, but you really haven't struck the essence of doing lean. And that essence to me is all around problem solving. Okay. If I were to say to you, over the course of all the time I spent in this, if you only gave me one tool or two, let's say, it would be standard work and problem solving. Why? Because I need a standard to understand whether or not I'm I have an abnormality to the standard. But problem solving to me is a lost art. There's so much spoken about it, and we still skip the most important part of problem solving, which is collecting the data, analyzing the data to create a good problem definition statement. Okay. I've seen so many great solutions looking for a problem over the course of my career. And that whole concept of problem solving is essential to lean. And so everybody said, "Oh, we start with 5S." Really? What problem are you trying to solve? And and I think as well as I do with Toyota. My experience with Toyota was they didn't look at these tools as separate elements. Consultants like to package them that way, right? They like to package tools. Hey, I'm going to do 5S this week. I'm going to come in next week. I'm going to bill you for standard work, and then we're going to do a SMED. And no, these tools work together. And I've never done one Kaizen where more than one tool was not involved. Okay. And we don't go in. We may say I'm going to do a single minute exchange of die, but if I'm not talking about 5S, if I'm not talking about visual management, work standards, I mean, go down the list. Okay. Then all you're doing is implementing a tool that's not going to last. So I really do believe in kind of answering one of the questions here. People who come strictly from a greenfield where there's a lot of infrastructure already understood have trouble. And in all due respect, as much as I love Toyota, and I interviewed a lot of people when I was running the Danaher Business System, I never hired anybody from Toyota because they did not understand how to work in a true brownfield environment where somebody comes up to you and says, screw your tack time, Mark. Take your tack time, put it up your butt. This doesn't work here. And you want me to make you nuts? They don't really face that because the thinking is already baked into the culture.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
like a long time to do that, right? Because Ono didn't have this
yeah,
kind of pushback when he started back in the 50s. So
yeah,
anyway, I'll stop there. But I don't know if I'm answering these questions or not. But I
yeah,
think it's really important to understand how are you going to set your company up to win with
yeah,
an organization. And now a lot of these things that you mentioned, people put up Gemba boards and posters and all this because a lot of lean people don't know what to do. So they have to give the appearance that they're doing something. All right. Most Gemba boards I see are measuring lagging indicators, which don't help you in problem solving. Um, I look at. I had one client that the executives want to set up a steering committee. I said, "What are you guys going to steer? You know nothing." I was very frank. You know nothing. How are you going to ask the right questions? You guys refuse to get involved in kaizens. You refuse to learn, but you're going to steer this. You're going to steer it right off the cliff. Okay.
mm,
And I had to drop that client because these leaders did not want to get involved. They
mm,
wanted everybody else to do the work. And whenever you see a leader that says, my people need to change, that's a red flag. Because to your point, if you don't think about yourself first and what you have to do differently, because you got to these positions in very traditional fashions.
yep.
Okay.
Oh yes,
If
oh
you're not
yes.
thinking about how I need to change my thinking, guess what? It's not going to work. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many points you raised, Mark. I mean, I look at. I mean, fundamentally, I've worked with, I think, probably about 80% have been brownfield sites. And I learned very quickly that the client, every client is somewhere on their own individual journey in terms of continuous improvement.
That's right.
And there has to be a reason for it's really one of Nietzsche's quotes, yeah. Uh, um, um, Friedrich Nietzsche that said, if you find the reason for why, the how is easier to realize. So the client has to have a why. They have to have a problem, and the problems are engagement of employees, quality issues with product, late delivery. There are many different whys that the client feels as a pain. So they have to feel a pain. The patient has to come to the doctor to say, I have a pain. And so that my job has been then to say, well, let's talk about your problem to understand whether this is a problem or it's something else, to understand the context of what we're talking about. And secondly, are you prepared to engage yourself and other people in solving this problem that you have, which is actually which you have actually created yourself. You've actually worked with your people for many years to create this situation that you have a problem with takt time, or you have a problem with engagement of people, or you have rotation, the employee rotation is too high, or your management, you're going back to Colleen's question, value stream management, you've built up an organizational structure with a set of goals and KPIs and a fiefdom system, which is now not competitive in the environment, and you see that as a pain. Are you prepared to work on this? It's the same as if I went to a coach in a gym. The coach would ask me, why are you here and what do you want to improve? And then so I'm going to tell them maybe it's my weight, or maybe I want to trim my figure, or I want to do something with myself. So then based on that, the next thing the coach is going to ask is, how serious am I about working with him and on myself to solve that problem, right? Because there's no point doing 3-4 sessions if I'm going to miss the sessions, if I'm not going to keep the diet, if I'm not going to be disciplined, if I'm not going to do my standard work for my training. And it's the same thing with clients. So I look at a client and I say, what are you ready for today? And very often I can see that the client sees an immediate problem that you can help them with. And so my approach is to say, you know what, I can see your problem and I will help you discover how to solve that problem so it doesn't come back again with your team. so that you're more self-reliant, so teaching you to fish rather than giving you the fish myself. But once you've done this, there are other things that you need to address, yeah, because it's never just one problem, yeah, and things are far more complex than just one issue. So there has to be a reason for the why, and if the client feels the why strongly enough, they'll find a reason how to solve the problem. Yeah. So
that's really a good point, because a lot of the problems that I've faced with clients, they wanted to boil the ocean, and you got to break these problems down into their components. And
yeah,
I'll give you one example. We just had one that had a problem with a gluing process, and the product either had no glue, too much glue, or too little glue, and that was in their problem statement. And I made them whittle that down. I said, show me the data of where your biggest problem is, and the biggest problem happened to be the no glue. And I said, that's what we're going to focus on in our problem statement. Now, if we learn something that's going to help the other two abnormalities, fine, we'll put those in a parking lot. But right now, the biggest issue you have is no glue, and we're going to find what the issue is. Well, as it turned out, the no glue did contribute to some of these other issues. Okay. But I did not let them spread themselves so thin where they're going to go after three different things that could conceivably be three different problems, right?
yeah,
And so focus is really, really key. I look at the problem solving. One of the teams that I've worked with, matter of fact, just recently, didn't come to a conclusion because we're in the process of continuing to experiment. Okay. And until we go through all the iterations of experimentation, we're not going to find out what a true root cause and countermeasures are going to be. So problem solving, everybody, hey, you got to come up with the answer like right away. Well, no. And I go back to Thomas Edison's he didn't post. Thomas Edison's quote. Although the internet's so funny, I did see a post from Thomas Edison the other day. Okay, it was his account. He posted it, and Abe Lincoln, and I saw all the great Margaret Thatcher posted. Oh, everybody did.
Oh, right.
You can find anything on the internet. But no, seriously though, Edison said, "Hey, I did not fail 10,000 times when I invented the light bulb. I just found 10,000 ways it wouldn't work."
Nice. Yeah.
And he looked at those experiments as successes. Okay, because I don't have to screw with them anymore. I have to go back and mess with those anymore.
That's the principle. Look at every problem as an opportunity to develop yourself and your people. When I joined Toyota, I had a meeting with the CEO, and it was very interesting. It was the first meeting I had with him, and it was a stand-up meeting. And they said to me, the meeting's going to last 20 minutes. And I said, that's short, isn't it? And it's going to be stand-up. And I thought, that's odd. And everything he said to me, we stood by the board, the whiteboard, and everything he said to me that was important, he either wrote it down or made a picture, a graphic. And that meeting took place 25 years ago. And I remember that meeting and what he said because of their visual management. But I was just wanted to go back to the question of the value stream management that you mentioned earlier, or Colleen asked about, and I'm just wondering whether, thinking about how competitive now the work environment is, competition coming in from Asia and so on, and Western companies really struggling with a lot of to be able to compete in this market. So one of the things you raised was this thing about the traditional silo structure in organizations, that companies, are not really keen to go into creating a value stream, looking at value stream management. Yeah. And I'm just have a reflection based on experiences with several clients over the last 9 months, where they didn't change the organizational structure, because that would be a real revolution to get out of, away from the 16th century British Empire model of setting up an organization. But when we started to talk about finance and the way that the financial analysts can provide the information that's required for a value stream, the conversation completely changed, because then people were saying, well, oh, this is a value stream, this is the order, and this is the delivery. And in between, we have all these processes and wasted processes that we want to optimize, that we want to eliminate, or reduce. And could we have a management reporting system, a financial management reporting system, which allows us to have full transparency in what's happening in that value stream? And so once you get finance people providing you with the information, the value stream managers, let's say, whether it's product, process, or customer based, once you have that information coming in, that creates a completely different quality of discussion, because people are talking about real money. They can really see how the value stream can reduce the cost of one unit or increase the cost of one unit, or the quality of the product, or the lead time in terms of delivery of one unit or a batch. So I just wanted to go back to that point. So that I wanted to park that. But regarding brown site, green site, is it green site? Is there another expression? Greenfield. Sorry, greenfield or brownfield. Yeah. Most of my experience has been in brownfield, and to be honest, I just say I repeat what I said earlier. I look at the client and I say, what are you prepared to accept as a discussion point at this point in your developmental journey? What are you prepared to accept? And you're basically going back to Nietzsche, and you're saying, if there is a reason for a why, in other words, they have a problem, they're prepared to sit down with you and say, let's talk and show me how to solve this problem. And then you can slowly get the transition going, get this transition going. Okay.
Mark, the more I've been involved in Lean, I've been getting a lot more into philosophy.
Yeah.
And Nietzsche, if you guys don't know who Nietzsche is, I think he's a 19th century philosopher. Was it 19th century? I think he was. Anyway, he was a promoter of nihilism, but a very influential philosopher. And it's interesting when you look at all the different philosophers, they all come at things from a different angle. Some have different views, but a lot of philosophy is based in lean thinking. Okay.
Yep.
And even going back to Socrates and the Socratic method of asking questions and not accepting. And one of the keys to problem solving is not to accept the premise of the question that's being asked.
Yeah.
I had a question the other day. We had a problem with falling product that could kill somebody if it fell on them. And they said, what would you do with a customer who insists on loading the truck regardless of safety and not spreading the loads out on multiple trucks because they want to, preserve their cost? The first question, I didn't answer that. I said, I didn't answer it, but I answered it with a question. I said, well, first of all, tell me how that aligns with the safety, quality, delivery, cost hierarchy. That's the first thing I want you to think about. Okay. Obviously, you're optimizing cost where safety is number one on the list. The second question I have is, if product fell on somebody and killed them, I am sure whatever agreement and rationale you used with the customer, the family of that person who got killed would totally accept your reasoning and rationale. Okay. So I want you to envision having that conversation with the family. Okay. I'm sure they'll understand of all this money you saved the customer that their husband, brother, son, mother, whatever, was killed. Okay. And thirdly, why do you think you can't have safety and low cost at the same time? See, I just blew the premise all the way and say I don't accept the premise that you can only have low cost if you have poor safety. Okay, you can't have high safety, great safety with low cost. I just blew that out of the water and said I'm not going to accept that as a question, okay, or as a premise, right? Yeah. So this is a skill that we all have to develop as lean thinkers, and not just think that we have to answer. Consultants think that they have to come up with answers. That's the wrong, and leaders the same way. All right, they got there by giving great answers, but what they really need to learn is how to ask the right questions. and those questions have to be grounded in the principles of lean. You know, and so when I look at some of the questions that are coming up here, a lot of that has to do with, going back. Always consult the fundamental principles before you even open your mouth and address an issue. Okay, because you're going to find that the principles will always lead you to the right path or lead the people you're coaching to the right path. Okay, I don't know how to secure a load in a truck that's optimized by cost. I have no idea. I do know though it can be done. You want to know why? Because we sent a man to the moon. We fly in the air for 18 hours at a time without stopping safely. We've done all this great stuff as a race, if you will. So I gotta believe there's a way to secure a load and keep it safe. Okay, I gotta believe there's something out there that we can do that. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and tell you why or how, but I'm not going to accept the fact that you can't do that. And
So
one of the go ahead. Mark.
yeah, on that, yeah, good. Yeah, on that point, I just wanted to butt in and say that the principles apply to every business. So some companies could say, well, you're in a high volume business, but we make, I don't know, 6 products a year or something, or 3, because we're making, I don't know, building submarines or something, or we're building 20 tanks a quarter and not 5,000 cars a month. So we in our business is different, or we're a foundry business, and our business is different. You get a lot of that. And I always try and say, the principles don't change.
Exactly.
Yeah? So even if you're looking at visual management and you're recording hourly production rates, because that's the kind of business you're in, that applies to that business. You're using visual management, you're checking it against the plan, against the forecast. But in a different business, you may be measuring it in weeks or months, because it's a different time span, it's a different business, but the principles are still the same. Yeah. You still have
that's exactly. I always ask the question. Well, you make 6 units a year. Okay, so I assume there's no waste in your process at all, right?
Yeah, right.
And then so that's what you're saying to me. Okay, that there's no waste to be identified at all in your process, and your customers are totally happy with your lead times, and I'm sure they're thrilled with your quality. Okay, but I'll tell you a quick story. I've told this before on my Lean 911 podcast, but George Sherman, who is our CEO, I reported to George for almost a decade. He's the one that asked me to do for Danaher what we did for Jake Brake, okay? And Jake Brake was a division of Danaher, and that gave rise to the Danaher Business System. George, to me, was the greatest CEO I ever met in my life. I met many CEOs, and he's my benchmark. I haven't met anybody that I had some that were really close, but to me, George was everything in terms of being strategic, tactical, unbelievable people person, unbelievable supporter of what we did. But one day he came to me and said, "Hey, Mark, I was in our Cleveland operation, and I went down to North Carolina, and they have different visual management boards." Okay. I said, "So what's the issue?" And he said, "Well, every time I go into these facilities, I got to re-educate myself on the way they track their production and all that." I said, "Well," so I looked at him and I said, "George, I didn't realize you were the customer." He looked at me and he said, "Okay, smartass, what do you mean by that?" I said, "Look, the real key here is, first of all, I'm not smart enough to come up with one visual management system that's going to satisfy all our different businesses. We had a lot of different businesses that did all kinds of different things, from electronics to forgings to assembly. I mean, we did plating, galvanizing. I mean, we had all kinds of things, heat treat, forming. We had all kinds of machining. I said, I'm not smart enough to come up with one process that's going to satisfy all these businesses. I mean, we had one business that made 2 periscopes a year for the Navy that went on ships, on submarines, and we had other businesses that made 1 million sockets a day for Sears Craftsman hand tools. Okay, but let's say I was smart enough to come up with the most elegant, perfect solution. It's still not going to work, because I'm forcing it down people's throats.
Yeah.
So what I'm concerned about more is that the principles of visual management are being enacted. Abnormality at a glance, status at a glance and abnormality detection. Okay. That can feed into problem solving. And quite frankly, I said, George, I don't care if they do it on the back of a napkin. I don't care if they do it on a big electronic board, which I would discourage, but okay, fine. But I want them to come up with it, and all I care about is that they're in concert with the principle.
Yep.
And then I went on to say that the Danaher Business System is not immune to Kaizen. Okay,
All the time.
it can be improved. So how are we
Yeah.
going to improve it? If I had one client that dictated they call them a glass wall, and everybody had to do the glass wall exactly the same. When I went out to the factories, they get no buy-in, and to change it would be an act of Congress. You'd never be able to change it. Okay, they couldn't customize it to their business. And I would go out to these plants and ask them, "Oh, how's that glass wall working?" We only pull it out when corporate comes in because they want to see it, but we don't use it. We use this stuff over here. So what I would suggest is that these great new inventions get put into our website so people can benchmark and do what we call Yokotin and say, hey, by the way, Cleveland's doing that. I'm going to take some of that. I'm going to take something that North Carolina's doing and something somebody over in Italy's doing and create a new version of visual management. And that's how DBS grew. Okay. So, dictating from corporate is the wrong thing. I'm also, you probably heard me say, I am adamantly against audits by a corporate lean office. They promote so many bad behaviors. And you'll have those same lean offices saying, yeah, the facilities are our customer. Oh, well, then why is the supplier auditing their customer? I've never seen that happen before. Maybe your customer should audit you and see how well you guys are doing. Okay. Because a lot of these audits are simply because the people that get into these lean offices don't know what to do. That's the problem. Okay. So they have to find something to do and show that they're making some kind of progress. All right. And show their bosses that they're busy but what they're doing is causing an immense amount of disruption to the organization by having these audits. And I'll go as far as outside agencies like Shingo. I don't know why in the world anybody would want to get certified by Shingo. Who cares what Shingo says? I care more about what my customers and employees say about me. Okay, that's what really matters. And so, I just don't understand why we look for these certifications, be it corporate or outside, and you got to pay money for it. And it's a huge distraction to the business. And it causes all kinds of bad behaviors, So, and matter of fact, a lot of companies like to take all their facilities and rank them from best to worst on some scorecard that they created. Okay. And the problem with that is you're shaming companies and somebody's always going to come in last. Okay. And that's not good. That's not what you want to do. So they think, we're going to create competition and we're going to, we're going to get them to really want to be. Well, not everybody can be number one. And your scorecard sucks anyway because you don't know what you're looking at and you don't know really what matters to this business. You're forcing them to do things on your scorecard that don't matter to them. Okay. And so it's a big waste of time and it's a distraction. I mean, I've been on both sides of this and I did audits in the Danaher Business System, but I did them differently. I would go in and audit. They would audit. We'd talk about the deltas, and then I'd leave, and it didn't get published anywhere. But even that, I mean, hey, Mark, come on in and tell me what you think about our facility. Okay, fine. But this whole audit thing, to me, has gone haywire, like Gemba boards have, and some other things. So anyway, I'll stop there. But I can talk about this all day, but it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to sort of make a summary conclusion. I'm just thinking, well, how do we put this sort of close this off? What would be the key points to pull out of this conversation? We obviously need more time to discuss things.
We could probably do more of these, Mark, because I think we could pick certain topics, and I'll ask people that are out there today to write in and ask certain topics so we can dive deeper into a lot of these different areas.
I think
Before we go, by the way, but
Yeah.
before we go, I want to address one more question from Ricardo out of Mexico, good friend of mine, and Ricardo has a lot of great insight himself in lean, and he asked about technology. Okay, and now AI is coming out and all that. I see a big advantage for AI in the Yokoten department, if you will. Okay, Yokoten, if you're not familiar with that term, is spreading best practices, right?
I know.
But
Very much.
no, I know you know. But
It's in my book as well. It's one of the habits. It's one of the habits.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. We're going to talk about that in a
One of the
minute.
habits.
Yep. And
It's one of the habits.
but what I see here with technology is that we look to buy a solution, and we usually automate, whether it's with equipment or with software, we automate waste. Okay, and we don't take the waste out to begin with. All right, and I've actually saved millions of dollars for clients that want to put an ERP system in, and delayed it for 18 months and saved them 80 to 100 million dollars of ERP because we took the waste out of the system. I don't want to automate waste. I don't want to do waste faster. I want to get rid of waste, right? And so technology is a whole nother avenue where everybody thinks robots and technology. And I just did a post yesterday on LinkedIn about how we show all this great automation, and all it is just automating waste. And we created complexity. We created something we can't improve because it's hardwired, and we also created technology that has to be maintained from a technical perspective. And geez, why can't you just pick that product up and hand it to the next guy? Why do we need a machine to do that? That kind of thing. I'm not saying all automation is bad, but when you look at Chaco lines, and maybe we could do a whole section on automation, you really want to look. There's four parts really. You think about the process itself. Let's say you're drilling a hole. Okay. There's the transfer of the part. There's the unload, and there's the load. Okay. Those are the four parts. The most problematic are the load, because you have to be very precise, and the transfer mechanism is usually what gets screwed up from a technical perspective that will shut you down. So you want a Chaco line that basically says it's a load line. Okay. And I'm going to load it. Hanadashi is an automatic eject that would spit the part out. I'd pick it up and move it to the next process. I've seen some unbelievable Chaco lines in Japan made by Chihiro Nakao. And so anyway, technology is a whole nother avenue, Ricardo, that we can probably have a whole session on and all that. So, but anyway, that's I'm just looking at the chat here to see what other kind of questions. Yeah, a little bit more on Mark on certification. I'm not a big fan. Even I'm a certified green belt. Big deal. I don't know. Many times I see certification as a counter to the philosophy of Kaizen. In that, hey, look, I've arrived. I got certified. No, you didn't. You got certified. It's great. You learned something. But I actually had a client one time, and this is a true story. They wanted me to go to their best plant, which I did go see. And it was a pretty damn good plant, I have to admit. But I saw a lot of things that they could have done better, right? So I got back in the room with the president and his staff, and they wanted my feedback. And I think they were just expecting a bunch of accolades, which I gave them. But I said, here's some things I think you need to think about. Boom, 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 boom. Well, maybe it was my delivery, because I'm kind of frank, as you know.
It was.
But the president got a little bit ruffled, and he went to his office, and he says, hang on for a minute. And he pulled out the fact that the plant won the Shingo Award the year earlier. And he put the Shingo Award on the table, and he looked at me and said, now talk to me. I said, I'm done. You've arrived. Congratulations. You've hit nirvana. There's nothing else you can do. And I'm really no good for you here. And I got up and I left. He goes, where are you going? I can't stay here. I can't help you. Look, I identified things in your plant that need to change, I told him. But that's not where the Kaizen has to happen. The Kaizen has to happen up here before you can make changes out there. Okay. And I left. I left. I walked out and left. Got out, changed my flight, got on a plane, and left. I was done. I'm not going to tolerate that crap. I'm sorry. You you think you've arrived because you won the Shingo Prize? God, there's been businesses that went out of business a year later or got put on FDA hold for quality for a year with their product that won Shingo awards. And I don't want to pick on Shingo. I'm talking about any certification. Okay, I'm just not a big fan of them. Sorry. And if they're distracting, they cost a lot of money and they waste your time. And you work on things that don't matter to your customer or to your employees. And I'm not saying they don't make you better to some degree, but there's much better ways to do it, guys. Okay, you don't need some third party coming in with their criteria as to what they think good looks like. Sorry, I did a whole episode on Lean 901 and about this. So I just you know am anti-certification even for people, believe it or not. And hey, look, I know the resume game. You got to get these things. I understand that. That's fine. Okay, but please don't think you've arrived because you got certified. Please, I'm certified in a number of different areas. You know, the older I get, the more I know how much I don't know.
Mm,
You
mm.
know,
I mean,
that's just really a question of age.
these are all, these are all, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sorry to go back to my book, but the first habit talks about humility, right? Um, and why do I bring this up? Because the habit of self-reflection, Hansei, because even if you had 2 Shingo prizes sitting on your desk, it doesn't mean you've arrived. It just means you have some certificates because you achieved some sort of scoring pattern, which somebody considered. But tomorrow you could do one step better. So, and I come across this quite a lot. I see, I come across clients who say, we've got 3 master black belts in Six Sigma. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. But can we just get on with looking at what the problems are in your business and developing people in problem solving so we can drive the business results? Yeah, because that's where we're going to make the money for the shareholders. That's where we're going to deliver the value for the client, and that's where we're going to deliver the value for the employees. Yeah, I remember my first meeting with the CEO of the Toyota plant. He said to me, Mark, in your function, you have got 3 KPIs. You've only got 3 KPIs, and if your team delivers these KPIs, then we're home and dry, and we're going to be expecting even more from you. And I said, what are those 3 KPIs? He said, you're going to get a team of people that is going to drive 2 production facilities, and all we want you to do is improve 3 KPIs. And the first KPI is we want to be able to demonstrate that every person starting from the front line up until to senior management have improved their problem solving skills. That's the first KPI. The second KPI is we want them to become more self-reliant, because then we have more flexibility about what we can do with these people. And the third one, which is an outcome of the first 2, but also requires some additional attention, is engagement. Engagement. He said that there are just 3 KPIs, and if you deliver those, and he asked me this question, he said, Mark, if you have a factory or 2 factories in this situation where people are problem solvers, delivering the business results, in developing themselves to become more self-reliant. So we're talking about the competency matrix here as well. Yeah, and they are very high on the engagement score because of their development and self-reliance. What more do you expect from an employee? And that question was put to me 25 years ago, and I still haven't answered it. I don't know what else you could expect from an employee. So that's and I think that's one of the things that we try and do is we try to work with people so that they are better at identifying problems and being able to solve them in a way that, not problem fixing, but problem solving, so they don't come back again. And in that way, they become more self-reliant and have personal satisfaction, in being able to say that we did this, we built this, we made this happen. Yeah. So certificates have their place, and as you say, we know why certificates are around, but really they're not the proof of the pudding. The proof of the pudding is, are we delivering the results and have smiles on people's faces? Yeah. So, yeah,
Well,
that was, yeah,
think about the
amazing.
beauty of what you just said, because a lot of leaders look at lean and they say, hey, show me the results, which are usually, again, lagging indicators.
Yeah, yeah,
What you
yeah.
suggested there, and I know Toyota in
Yes.
particular, you're going to be measured on how you develop people as to how they solve problems.
Otherwise, you
Okay,
don't go. You
that's a
don't step up.
process. Yep, that's a process-based
Yeah.
leading indicator as to whether or not you're going to sustain. And again, I'll go back on that one statement that was made to me in 1990 at Toyota in Japan. He said the difference between world-class companies and those that are not is their ability to solve problems.
Exactly.
And he went on to say, even the great Toyota, he kind of chuckled and he said, hey, even the great Toyota has problems, but we only solve our problems once.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
That's it.
brilliant.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know what he really meant by that, but later I learned. Back then.
Yeah.
Oh, come on! I was 3 years into it back then, and back
Yeah.
then we all
Yeah.
thought at Danaher we knew everything there was to know about lean.
Yeah.
God, we weren't even in nursery school. I mean, seriously. And
Exactly.
right now, I probably put myself in second grade.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're all students, aren't we? We're all
Yep.
students of the
Yep.
philosophy. It is really profound.
Yep.
And I think one of the things I love about your book is that you talk about why things flatline. Yeah. And it's not about the process, it's about just the whole attitude we have. It's all about silver bullets and give me quick wins, get me the ERP system, all my problems will go away. Put in 5S and everything's going to no. I think humanity, I think leadership, we're talking about leadership, we're always trying to find the quick solution which requires the least amount of effort from ourselves. And I found that what really is sustainable, and I think this is what you say and other really profound people out of wisdom, is that if you want to run a successful business today and tomorrow, you really have to start with looking at the way you manage your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own habits and how that influences other people. Because most people come to work and want to do a good job, but at the end of the day, they are just finished, and they're not prepared to give the best of themselves because you have not provided them with the environment for that to happen.
Exactly.
And I'm so against these courses and programs in culture and organizational development, because one thing I learned from one of my sensei, one of the ex CEOs of Toyota, he said the culture of the organization is what the member sees and hears you do and say. That's the culture statement. Yeah?
Yep.
The placards, not the training that cost a fortune. The culture and the values, the principles is the proof of the pudding. Is the way you behaved when there was an Andon call, the way you behaved when there was a problem with the line stop. Yeah, the way you.
You mean tell me you don't need a big MBA consulting company to tell you what culture is? Why? That's Hey, Mark. Speaking of which, well, that I think that's a phenomenal, because I think one of the biggest disrespects for people, and there was a question earlier about respect for people principle, is companies who expect to, they say, hey, we're going to implement lean. We got a lean program. I hate that word program, by the way. And we are going to do all kinds of great things, including our ERP. Matter of fact, one CFO told me all the great things that he was going to have on his ERP system that he was buying for $120 million. And I said, boy, if you're going to get that kind of benefit, you should just buy two. You shouldn't just buy one, right? Seriously. I mean, come on, buy two of them. And but I was trying to be a little smart ass, but the companies that expect results and don't provide the framework for their people, whether it's the organization, the teachers, the resources, the time, the training to solve problems, but expect them to do it. There's one company I worked with that said, well, I didn't work with them. I don't really think I wanted to work with them. We're gonna do kaizens between 1 and 3 on Wednesday. Okay, they're not giving the framework to succeed. To me, that is the biggest disrespect for people, because the screwed up processes that ruin people's days when things don't go right, they go home with that frustration, with that, when I talk about psychological safety, they go home with that. They take it home to their families. They miss that red light in traffic because they're really worried about the meeting they just had, talking about these problems, knowing nothing's going to get done. There's physical harm in that regard, whether it's accidents or whatever. And to me, the biggest disrespect out there is executives expecting magic to happen, but have not changed a damn thing in their organization as to how that's going to happen. And that even goes back to the conversation we had about value stream mapping or value stream organizations. Okay. So, Mark, let's close it out by looking at you. You have a new book. And I'm going to actually show your book. Why don't you talk a little? This just got released like what, about a month ago, right?
In January, actually, 2nd of January.
January, okay.
Yeah.
Time's flying.
Yeah.
Talk about this book. What's Genba Igaki?
I have no idea. Gemba. Okay, so Gemba is well, we all know what Gemba is. It's place where the place of the crime, I call it, place where the work is created. And Ikigai is is more about referring to the meaning of work. So in the book, I talk about 16 habits, and the habits are broken down into 4 sections. The first 4 habits relate to working on yourself. Working on yourself. So if you want to be a good, effective leader and you want to develop a company and a business and a team, then one of the first things you should do is actually look in the mirror and start with yourself. So there are 4 habits there. And then the second group of habits talk about, well, if I've worked on myself and I've really done some internal self-examination about my habits and my behaviors and how I impact myself and how I could potentially impact others, I'm now going to look at the next 4 habits, which look at how I can build teams, how I can engage people, how I can build those teams so they want to come to work every day, and keep those standards, improve those standards, improve and move themselves forward as a team, as a tribe, if you like. Manage the tribe. Before you manage the tribe, learn to manage yourself. Look for the monsters under the bed, as Jordan Peterson would say. Yeah, Professor Jordan Peterson. Yep. And then the third set of 4 habits are all about process and problem solving. So there's a lot of wisdom there that I've taken away from Toyota in terms of 4 habits which every good leader should have if you want to really have a positive impact on improving process through problem solving. So there are 4 habits there. And finally, the 4th section is all about 4 habits which influence the organizational culture in a wider context. So, I talk about climbing the mountain with the PDCA Kaizen experience. I talk about engaging others. Yep. I talk about Andon, the importance of Andon, and how Andon is a fundamental culture change in every organization. And then finally, I talk about Yokuten and sharing best practices. What did you do last week to share best practices, or last month in the company? So that's what it's about. It took me 8 years to write the book. What you see here is version 27. I think I went through it so many times to try and improve it, and in the end I just said, look, I'm just going to publish this. and then get this out the way, and then do a second version some stage in the future. But it was just a question of getting it out. And the reason I published this book wasn't for fame and fortune, because I wouldn't make money on this, and I didn't think I'd become famous. But it was to say, look, I've learned something as an engineer, ex-finance guy who spent 35 years in leadership roles, and 25 of which strictly in a lean and building lean environments and lean transitions. And I have come across certain experiences which I think work, and therefore I would like to put them down as my, if you like, my contribution giving back to society, to say, look at this. It isn't easy. There's a lot of psychology here. There is some neuroscience in here as well. There is some elements which touch on the faith aspect of the individual as well. Because I think work is not just only work, but it is about the realization of man and the purpose of work for man. So there is deeper. There are 5 levels to this book if people want to really go into it very deeply from a psychological and behavioral and belief system. So there are 5 levels hidden in the book, but it's my contribution today to the business community to say, look, have a look at this book, read this book, read other books like, Flatline and other good authors, to develop your thinking, because running a business is managing people, and it's about it's far more difficult to manage people than it is to manage robots or some information systems. And businesses are all about managing people. Even though we have technology and AI and Industry 5 or Industry 6, it's still going to be about people. So start to manage yourself and your own weaknesses and your strengths, and then roll that out to your team, to problem solving and to processes, and then roll that out into a company-wide policy. You have a unique opportunity to make a positive contribution in your life to other people. Get it right. Work on yourself. That's why I wrote the book. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to explain that, Mark.
Yeah, and I think it's an important book, because I think, again, I go back to the statements I've heard all the time. I need to get my people to change. And that's, like I said, a red flag, right? And maybe that's why you have the book in red. And because well, yeah, I mean, that's a kiss of death when you hear that, because I got to get my people to change. Really, what about you? And these processes are a reflection of your leadership, that you're now, by stating that, are basically shifting the responsibility and, if you will, blame to the people under you that have created these processes on your watch, and you've been here for how many years, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to change.
The military, there are no weak teams, there are only weak leaders. Yeah,
that's right. That's exactly
and it's
right.
the same in business. If the company fails, the team doesn't perform, and there are problems with quality or delivery, just you as the leader, take the mirror and look at yourself. Habit number 1. It's the most difficult habit.
Did you make your bed today? That's, yep.
No, I was in the hotel, so that somebody else made it for me. But I mean, yes, exactly. We're going back to.
I got up really early this morning, Mark, and my wife was still sleeping. So if I made the bed, it would have been a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
But I usually do make the bed first thing in the morning, as just something to say, hey, I got something done. Even if I have a screwed up day, okay, I got something done. I made my bed. Okay. And by the way, your book and my book, I believe, the subtitle on my book is probably the more important part. What to do about it. Okay. I think both these books are talking about, and your book in particular, talking about what to do about it. What has to happen? What's the real? And I've seen books out there on, hey, let's talk about the invisible and all that, but you talk about, you bring this home to a personal level that says you have to really change before we do anything. Now, one of the things I think that's really important for lean people is to understand also who their real customer is and how to talk to those customers. And I'm going to be kicking off soon, and I'd love to have you join me, something called Seat at the Table, where how do you get leaders to listen to you? Okay. And what's important to them?
Right.
How do they get measured? How do they get compensated?
I'm
May
good.
not be optimal, but if you don't
Yeah.
understand what's important to a leader and you go in and talk about things like empathy and respect for people, and you're not talking their language as to what's on their mind 90% of the day, then guess what?
Yeah.
It's going to fall on deaf ears. So
It is,
the
and
bigger,
that's a very good point. That's a great point
yep,
to pick up on the next thing. Yeah, it's how to
yep. Well, I'm going to do a whole
address
series
the
on that
agenda.
and actually
Yeah,
teach
love it.
people how to look at a P&L,
Yeah,
how to look at some really key numbers. Say, what does one inventory turn mean from a cash flow perspective?
cash
If you
flow.
go to
Yeah,
a leader with that, you catch their attention. There'll be plenty of time to talk about the intangibles, but you
Yep.
got to first get them at the table, right? And so, Mark, I think
Thank
I'm going
you.
to cut it out there. We have some great questions in the link. I'm getting a lot of feedback here that says they want to do more of this, so we should probably do more of this. And I am so sorry I couldn't make the trip to Poland this week, but I will make it up to you, I promise. And we look forward to the next time we're together. But Mark, well, how can we get your book? Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, just go on Amazon and just put my name in or write Gemba Ikigai and it will come up. And
Awesome.
it's available, I think, in 16 countries directly. In paperback, hardback, and Kindle. And the audio book will be coming out next month. Yeah. So,
Okay.
and yeah, thank you very much, Mike. It's a great honor. Honor to talk to you.
Okay, Mark. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for checking in on LinkedIn and also on the chat. And we'll do more of these. These were fun, and I think based on the feedback, people got a lot out of it. So let's go from there.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Lean 911 podcast. I'll be happy to address your questions or feedback on future episodes. Email me at mark@lean911.com. You can check out our other episodes by visiting our website at lean911.com, our YouTube channel, wherever you listen to podcasts. This is your host, Mark DeLuzio. Thanks for listening.